Today on Notsam Wrestling, Solo Sikoa debuts Tama Tonga and introduces a new Bloodline. Cody Rhodes' first week as champion, mysterious glitches happening on Raw and SmackDown, and AEW releases some footage of their own. This is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling on a week where we're looking ahead. You know, that's what I really noticed about the last 7 days or so. That the WWE was fully entitled to run kind of a victory lap. The more people talk about the main event of WrestleMania 40, Night 2 specifically, the more people are watching it, thinking about it, and more eyes have gotten on it, the more that opinion about it ranking all the way up there as potentially the best, it keeps coming back. But instead of resting on their laurels, things definitely pushed forward this week. And I think that's what's making everything so fun right now. As a matter of fact, that's what made the main event of WrestleMania 40 Sunday so great, was that as much as it was this parade of champions and it was bringing out all these stars that created the 40 years of WrestleMania, going back to The Undertaker, who started at WrestleMania 7, The Rock, WrestleMania 13, John Cena, I guess WrestleMania, 20? Was that his first WrestleMania match? I think he was on the pre-show, rapping with cardboard cutouts of Jay-Z and Fabulous. I think that was 19, so I think 20 was probably his first. But ultimately, with all of these stars of yesteryear, at the end of the day, the story was about Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, and Seth Rollins. And the visual that we got at the end of the night was Cody Rhodes being boosted up by all the stars of today. We're doing what should always happen, using what we've done to boost up what we're going to do. And there were a lot of questions about the Bloodline in particular after WrestleMania. What becomes of the Bloodline? It was the worst WrestleMania ever. For all of them, other than The Rock, maybe. The Rock got a pinfall victory over Cody Rhodes on Saturday. But his bloodline affiliation and where he stands, at least with the tribal chief, is always in question. I more mean the fact that Jimmy lost to Jay, and then, of course, our tribal chief, Roman Reigns, lost the universal, undisputed WWE. I don't even know if they've landed on exactly what it's called anymore, but the WWE Championship was lost to Cody Rhodes. And the question was, where does this leave everybody? And we got our answer. On SmackDown, Paul Heyman, Solo Sikoa, and Jimmy Uso walked to the ring. And it was really interesting because they came out to Solo Sikoa's music. Now, at first, that's not necessarily so weird. It's not like they're going to come out to Jimmy's music. And they're not going to come out to Roman's music if Roman's not with them. So the next best scenario is Solo Sikoa, right? Well, maybe there's more significance to it. Then we looked into it because Paul Heyman got the mic, center of the ring, the Hall of Famer, talked to the audience about what happened. And he had Solo Sikoa on his right and Jimmy Uso on his left. I'm trying to think in my head if I got right and left correct. And he did something that I think a lot of people did not expect. And he did something that character does not traditionally do in the world of sports entertainment or professional wrestling. Paul Heyman took accountability. And I think that this is, at the beginning, it was almost like, talk about the word acknowledgement. An acknowledgement by taking accountability for what happened. You're acknowledging everything that happened before it. If you're pretending like, oh, Roman got cheated, Roman shouldn't have lost, then you're kind of disregarding everything that he did on his title reign. Because if fans can't take seriously what you're saying now about what happened at WrestleMania, they're not going to be able to take seriously what you're saying about what happened on the way to WrestleMania 40. And on the way to WrestleMania 40, Roman Reigns did things for the professional wrestling industry and WWE as a company that I think people are they're starting to get it, right? There were thank you Roman chants on Monday Night Raw, but it's going to take some time, I think, before people really wrap their heads around everything that Roman has done thus far, by the way, without finality. Thus far, he's done this. You're talking about bringing 3.5 year, the concept of a 1,316 day world title reign into the modern era when it'd been generations since we'd seen anything like that. There was a period of time where wrestling fans were calling for long-term storytelling. Remember long-term storytelling. In fact, that was one of the strengths of the AEW when it first started, was that people were enjoying that clearly seeds were being planted and there was long-term storytelling being told. Well, Roman ushered that into modern WWE, the idea that you can tell a story over multiple years and do it in a way, which I think this is key as to why things are going so well for that business, is that it's being done in a way where when things happen, if you've been watching for a day, a week, a month, it's cool enough that it does something. It's significant. You get a reaction, right? Something is happening where you go, oh man, I got to keep watching. This is why I started watching this. But if you've been watching for years, there's another layer to it. You're rewarded for watching for years. It still works if you haven't been watching. If you haven't been watching for years, you're not lost looking at what's going on. But if you have been watching for years, you're not being spoken to like an idiot. If you have been watching for years, your investment feels like it gets paid off with these creative moves, I'll say. That's something that Roman Reigns and the Bloodline brought in. And beyond all that, making everybody that touched it so far so much bigger for it. Not just the people around him, but the people around him, right? I'm talking about both of the Usos separately. I'm talking about Paul Heyman being even bigger now than he was when he was the advocate for Brock Lesnar when Brock beat the streak. I'm talking about Sami Zayn. I'm talking about all of Roman's opponents. Kevin Owens, LA Knight, the list goes on. I'm talking about Solo Sikoa, who Solo Sikoa touched a WWE ring for the first time less than 3 years ago. He was one of these guys who showed up on NXT 2.0 without ever having any television experience and minimal experience on the indies. But somehow, and it's probably through a close association with Roman Reigns, has risen to this point where as a performer, he's given the responsibility to helm major segments, and it's working. And I mean, this is something that I think Roman was doing before the Bloodline. If you look at Braun Strowman, for example, and I think that we talked about this years ago when it happened, but Braun Strowman was another guy who was put up onto the main roster. He'd had like 2 matches maybe, brand new to NXT, came from the powerlifting world, and now he's on the main roster as a member of the Wyatt family, and he gets so big that fairly quickly he ends up in a high-profile spot. And when you're that big, you got to beat people. And when you're beating people, you have to make people believe that you can beat them. If you look at Braun Strowman before he started working with Roman and after, because this is before the Bloodline, this is before Roman went away, this is before any of it, Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns worked together on every house show for months and months and months and months. And the Braun Strowman that came out of working with Roman Reigns was a totally different guy. But Roman Reigns is gone now. Roman Reigns is, he's putting the work in, according to his Twitter account. And while he's gone, something else is happening. Paul Heyman did interviews before WrestleMania. And he said that one of the influences behind this tribal chief character, when Roman Reigns returned to the WWE during the pandemic and took a whole new approach to how stories were told and presented, Paul said that one of the influences that they discussed was the movie Apocalypse Now. And when you figure that out, you're like, okay, I see it. I see, especially in the beginning, where that was drawn from, right? Especially with the island of relevancy, which is still so important to the whole idea of what we're doing. But I saw a different movie being played out on SmackDown. I saw The Godfather being played out on SmackDown. When Michael Corleone realized that it was his time to take over, and that there were other bosses that were going to try to see this weakness and use it as a way to gain power and to snuff that family out and to not be there for it. What did Michael do? Michael waited until the one moment that he could strike. And in a single moment where guards were down, he took out every enemy and built an army in one fell swoop. And just like that, he had taken over. Michael is Solo Sikoa. That's what I saw as I watched SmackDown. So Paul Heyman, he gets in the ring, and he, as I said, takes accountability for everything that happened. He said, by orders of the tribal chief, which is important because he's not just speaking for himself. We know he's speaking for Roman Reigns. He's got the guy's phone number. He's got a phone that only, literally, all it does is call Roman Reigns. He says, by orders of the tribal chief, the Bloodline offers no excuses for what happened at WrestleMania 40. And Paul proceeds to tell a story of what happened at WrestleMania 39 and how even though Solo Sikoa interfered, Cody losing the match at WrestleMania 39 was Cody's fault. The idea that Cody was not prepared for Solo Sikoa to interfere in that match, and that's why he lost, well, that was Cody being ill-prepared for that match. And there's a lot of truth to that. He said WrestleMania 40, Roman lost because of himself. And he spelled out the story that we talked about on this podcast last week when we made our adjustments. That Seth Rollins was the one piece of unfinished business that Roman Reigns had. And Seth knew that when he presented his back to Roman, that there was no way that Roman would be able to refuse it. And that in and of itself was the shield that Cody needed, because that momentary distraction, that one moment where Roman acted emotionally instead of logically, was the moment that Cody needed to beat Roman Reigns. He says that accountability is a very important word on the island of relevancy. And then Paul is about to go into something which I still would love to hear what he was about to go into. Because he starts saying, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. And that's when Solo Sikoa stops Paul Heyman in his tracks. The whole time we're watching Paul Heyman, Roman Reigns through Paul Heyman really, take accountability for his loss at WrestleMania. Jimmy is on the side of Paul Heyman. Jimmy is on the side of the tribal chief. Jimmy goes along to get along. You know what I mean? Like, this is Jimmy. Solo, on the other hand, has a totally different energy the whole time if you're watching him. He's not happy. And he interrupts Paul Heyman. And he asks Paul Heyman, winning and losing matter, right? And Paul is shocked. He's shook, as a matter of fact. Paul goes, right, yeah, of course. And Solo goes, so when we lose, there are consequences, right? And Heyman goes, yeah, sure. And then he pushes Paul Heyman aside and he looks at his brother Jimmy Uso, who lost to Jay at WrestleMania. Now, of course, people pointed out the irony that Solo Sikoa has lost his share of matches on television since losing to John Cena, but maybe this is the consequence, right? There's more than one consequence. A beatdown is a consequence, but maybe Solo realizing that he's lost as well. means that he knows if Solo lost on the way to WrestleMania, if Jimmy lost at WrestleMania, if Roman lost at WrestleMania, the consequence for this is the Bloodline needs a facelift. And if Solo's going to be the only one who sees that, then Solo's going to be the one to take charge of it. And he approaches Jimmy, and Jimmy says, me? Really? Really? Me? We're brothers, you know. And Solo hugs Jimmy Uso, and he goes, I love you. You're my brother. Almost hauntingly, but Jimmy accepts it. He goes, okay, cool. And Solo releases him. Just then, as Paul Heyman just pointed out, that it was Cody Rhodes' fault that he didn't see a black hooded figure named Solo Sikoa attack him from behind. Like the Bloodline has done so many times before, a black hooded figure attacks Jimmy Uso from behind, and he reveals himself to be Tama Tonga. And Corey Graves and Wade Barrett both point out who this is. The son of Haku, who has been tearing it up in Japan for years now. He has come to the aid of Solo Sikoa, one would presume. All we know for sure at this moment is he's attacking Jimmy Uso. And he is putting the boots to him. Paul Heyman is terrified. He's in the corner of the ring, quivering, as Solo Sikoa is clearly calling the shots. Solo stops Tama Tonga from the beatdown that he is putting on Jimmy Uso. And Tama puts his one up, and Solo puts his one up. And then he brings Paul Heyman into the middle of the ring, and through absolute intimidation, and Paul Heyman really did an excellent job of portraying somebody who was being held hostage by this group. This group that to some degree he helped create is now holding him hostage. As Paul Heyman has no choice, he might as well have been soiling himself. Puts the one up because there's nothing else that he can do. And then he takes out his Roman phone and he speaks into it. And that's when Solo smacks the phone out of Paul Heyman's hand. And this is how you know this segment is working. There was an audible gasp from the crowd as many times on this road as we've watched Paul Heyman call Roman Reigns. The first person who stops him from calling Roman Reigns is Solo Sikoa. And then he stomps on the phone. Stomps it down, symbolically letting everybody know that he's the one who Paul Heyman will be talking to. There's no reason to get Roman Reigns involved in this at all. And that's when afterwards they take Jimmy's head off with a chair. They put him in the corner. They wrap his head in a chair and boom. And Jimmy gets taken out. And Paul Heyman is pressured to go with Solo Sikoa to the back. Later on in the night, we're at the medic room. Kayla Braxton trying to get the scoop. Paul Heyman walks out of the room. Kayla Braxton asks him, is Jimmy okay? Paul just shakes his head, no. And that's when Tama Tonga walks up to him, breathing down his neck, and says, by orders of the tribal chief. And Solo Sikoa just walks right up to Paul Heyman, shows him that spike, that thumb, and walks away. And Paul Heyman asks the question that so many at home are asking. What the hell does that mean? And we move along. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a new Bloodline. I got big WrestleMania 14 night after energy coming from this. The night after WrestleMania 14, when Shawn Michaels had lost the title and people assumed that DX was done. What's Triple H going to do without Shawn? Well, Triple H said, who do you go to? You go to your friends. You go to the Clique. Here comes X-Pac. And they build the DX army in front of our eyes. The New Age Outlaws join after that, and D-Generation X has reformed stronger than ever. Not only do I see a similarity with the Bloodline, but then I ask myself, who is the person who ultimately is approving all creative that goes on the air? The same man that cut that promo the night after WrestleMania 14, Triple H. It really is amazing how time is just a circle. It's just a circle, and it goes and goes. But ultimately, as Triple H has said in many, many interviews, the story never ends. It just keeps going. So what is the story here? Well, first of all, who is Tama Tonga? This was a question that there were people asking. Some people, because you hear about all these members of the Samoan dynasty who have not been on WWE television, who have never been a part of WWE. And people are wondering, where they'll fit in. Jacob Fatu is a name that has come up consistently. Of course, if you watch everything, this is a guy who has done a lot in MLW. But there are a lot of people who just watch WWE. Some people were like, oh, is that Jacob Fatu? Nope, different guy. Tama Tonga is the son of Haku. Okay, well, if Haku is not a blood relative, how is he bloodline? Well, Haku is an absolute WWE legend, WCW legend, and probably most importantly, legendary tough guy, like the guy who would beat anybody in the industry up easily. His reputation preceded him, but also one of the most respected superstars on and off screen in the history of this thing, especially off screen, like a legend for the respect that he carried. The reason why he's associated with the Bloodline is because he was like a brother from another mother scenario. Haku has been described by The Rock as an uncle for a long time. I mean, anytime The Rock has brought up Haku, he calls him his uncle. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Samoan dynasty, if you look at the video that I posted WrestleMania week that breaks down that Anoa'i Fatu Maivia family tree, the Tonga Kid, who is Rikishi's brother, was in a WWE tag team called the Islanders. His partner in the Islanders was Haku. The Tonga Kid also went by Tama when he was in the Islanders. It was Haku and Tama. So Haku's son is Tama Tonga. The Tonga Kid from the Islanders, his son is Jacob Fatu. It's a circle. It's all one circle. So the same way that a blood oath was made to start this whole bloodline thing between the Anoa'i family and the Maivia family, the same argument would be made for Haku's family that Tama Tonga is a part of. So that's where he fits in. And should we see, and there's Jacob Fatu, who's the son of, as I said, the Tonga Kid, a nephew of Rikishi, and therefore a cousin of the Usos. We also haven't seen, there's a wrestler named Lance Anoa'i, who's, part of the Anoa'i family, obviously. There's Zilla Fatu, who is Umaga's son, who's been wrestling. He's done some stuff with Booker T's promotion, Reality of Wrestling. There's a lot of people, but I think Jacob is one that people are really waiting for. I think that's the vision that people have right now. That should the bloodline be reformed as it looks like it is, Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and Jacob Fatu would be your three if you're going to get three, and I hope it's that three because, guys, Jacob Fatu is incredible. If we get to see him in this context, it will be awesome. I saw many people online when Tama Tonga went to Paul Heyman and said, by orders of the tribal chief, they went, oh, The Rock is calling in orders now. I don't think so at all. All we have to do is look at what we've been told on television. As I said, the payoff is there. If you're investing in these stories, the payoff is there for you. It was almost said and then not followed up on. But like a couple of months ago, Roman Reigns said straight up, Solo Sikoa is next in line to be the tribal chief. That after me, it's Solo. And when this was said, it was initially taken as, oh, that's a shot at Jimmy. oh, that's just to put Jimmy in his place and really know. But what if Solo took it to heart? What if Solo decided, I'm next in line? Cody Rhodes just took down our tribal chief. Now I'm your tribal chief. And he sees Jimmy as a weak link. I mean, and rises up to that new generation of Bloodline. I think that there's no doubt in my mind, even the way, if you look at how Solo stopped Tama Tonga from what he was doing, it's the same way Roman would control Solo. I don't know if Tama's going to be in that enforcer role. He could be, though. I think it won't be an exact, role for role switch around. But ultimately, Tama was following orders from Solo. Now, you could say, well, The Rock's the high chief, though, blah, blah, blah. The Rock acknowledged Roman Reigns as his tribal chief. Will The Rock side with Solo and Tama Tonga and whatever this new group looks like? Maybe, but that's down the road. That's far away. We're not going to see The Rock for a while. The Rock made that very clear on Monday night. I think that within the next week or two, it'll be made very clear that Solo Sikoa has taken the position of tribal chief. And what I'm really hoping we see is Paul Heyman forced to provide his services to the Bloodline, forced to provide his services to the tribal chief. Everybody knows Paul Heyman is a survivor. Paul Heyman has made nothing but enemies through his association with the Bloodline. If Paul doesn't have the tribal chief, what does Paul have? Nothing. Paul Heyman is only the wise man in conjunction with the tribal chief. Who is the tribal chief? If it's Solo Sikoa and there's nobody there to say otherwise, then it's Solo Sikoa. And I love the idea of Paul Heyman being forced to be there through sheer intimidation, knowing that this isn't right, knowing that Roman will be back, knowing that Roman's not done, but he's handcuffed to be there. Because then, there's so many elements that play out. If Roman comes back, when Roman comes back, who does he go after? Does he go after Cody? Or does he go after Solo in this new Bloodline when Roman does come back? Does Paul Heyman immediately go hallelujah and side with Roman Reigns? Is Roman a babyface? And does that mean Paul Heyman is a babyface? Or does the ultimate swerve ski happen and Paul Heyman turns on Roman Reigns only to find out that this wasn't a reluctant relationship, that Paul Heyman has fully invested in the idea that Solo Sikoa is the tribal chief? Could go either way. There's so many different scenarios afoot. Can you imagine the amount of Samoans and Tongans we could fit into a War Games match? Is that what we're going to do? We saw a taste of the Bloodline Civil War when it was the Usos versus Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa. Is this how we get the original Bloodline back together? Do we see Jimmy and Jay eventually come back together? Do we see them back up Roman Reigns to take on Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga? And who knows who else? Maybe Jacob Fatu. There are so many different directions we could go in with this, or do we not? I had said early on that this is what I saw for the Bloodline. That post-WrestleMania, the Bloodline is reinvented. And instead of being this Roman Reigns centerpiece who nobody in the industry can touch, it's a bunch of younger guys who are just causing absolute chaos. And it's amazing to see it all play out that way. A while back, deep into Roman Reigns' title run, Paul Heyman said that they were in the third inning of the Bloodline. He said a lot of people think that this is ending, but we're only in the third inning. We have so much runway in front of us. And some people thought that that was BS. Some people thought that they go, no way. Roman has already been champion for as long as he's been champion. Roman can't be champion this long. But I never thought that when Paul Heyman said they were in the third inning, that he was talking about the third inning of Roman's title reign. I thought he was talking, and still think that he was talking, about the third inning of the Bloodline story. And that this Bloodline story does not end when Roman loses the title. There's been too much built under Roman for it all to just vanish if Roman loses the title. I think what we're witnessing is why the thought was, even back then, that the Bloodline's only in the third inning, because we haven't even witnessed what the other side looks like. What does the other side of the Bloodline look like once this reign of terror is over? It doesn't just end. There's so much else happening. You know, I said months, if not years ago, that at some point Roman will lose the title, he will disappear, and when he disappears, he will come back. And because of the work that Roman did with the Bloodline, he's in a prime spot to finally be one of the biggest baby faces ever, if not the biggest baby face ever. You know, I don't think Roman needs to be a villain when he comes back. Everybody is ready to cheer Roman. And the more the months go on, everybody will appreciate what Roman did as a villain. And when people realize what a villain does to make their lives and their viewing experience better, what happens is that villain becomes a hero. It happens to all great villains. Happened to Steve Austin. Happened to The Rock. Happened to Randy Orton. Happened to Edge. Happened to Roddy Piper. The list goes on. Happened to Randy Savage. You can't stay a villain when people recognize how much you're doing and how good it is. And that's where Roman's at right now. Now, look, you guys know I'm a Bloodline fan. Is there a part of me that goes, clearly what we have in front of us is the opportunity to have a mega babyface Samoan group of the Usos and Roman Reigns versus a mega villainous group of the next generation of the Bloodline? Of course. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't at least a part of me that does love the idea of Roman Reigns, Jimmy Uso, Jey Uso, Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and who knows, Paul Heyman, maybe a Jacob Fatu, maybe a Zella Fatu, getting together and creating a super bloodline. Now, a super bloodline, I think, is the end of the line. That's kind of the last step. If you do it, there's kind of no coming back from it. But just for the visual of all of them together, and maybe we wait on that. Maybe that's like a Hall of Fame moment. Because right now, Roman gets in as Roman Reigns, and Roman gets in with the Bloodline. The Usos get in as the Usos, and the Usos get in with the Bloodline. That's what I mean. That's the power of what the Bloodline has done. That they've made the individual stars as well as the group a star. Paul Heyman gets to go back in with the Bloodline. It's pretty remarkable. So what ending are we in now? I don't know. That's the beauty of it. That's the fun of it. Where are we going? I will tell you that it makes me think, because there is a draft happening at the end of the month, and closer to the draft, we'll start going over full rosters and kind of fantasy drafting where everybody could, should, whatever go. But right now, technically, both WWE World Champions are on Monday Night Raw. They're Monday Night Raw superstars. Cody Rhodes, as the undisputed WWE Champion, is on Raw. And Damian Priest, as the World Heavyweight Champion, is also a Raw superstar. So the question is, where do they go after the draft? Clearly, those two titles have to go on different shows. That's the whole reason that there are 2 titles, and I don't see those titles unifying anytime soon. I mean, they just split the tag title, so I just don't see it. So the more I think about it, I feel like, and maybe this is just because so much has happened there, that the Bloodline is just such a SmackDown property. You see it pop up on Raw. There have been run-ins on Raw. Of course, Jey Uso has become a huge star on Raw, but ultimately, the story beats are just so associated with SmackDown. And there's a poetry to that because Paul Heyman is so closely associated with the Bloodline. And Paul Heyman is that sort of creative centerpiece for early SmackDown, in the sense that he's the one who, when SmackDown first started, well, maybe not when it first started, but when they did that split, when they first did the roster split, and SmackDown became its own entity, and you had the SmackDown 6, Paul Heyman was the one who created something different on SmackDown. And so the fact that now this other thing that is so different and so good and revolving around Paul Heyman is being created on SmackDown, it just feels like poetry. So I don't want the Bloodline. I don't want Solo or Tama or any of those guys to leave SmackDown. So which world champion goes over to SmackDown? Right now, if you ask me, as much as the Judgment Day is associated with Monday Night Raw, I feel like Damian Priest has to be the one to go over to SmackDown. And the reason for that is that if Cody Rhodes is on SmackDown, then the Bloodline has no excuse to not go after him. If the purpose of the Bloodline is to correct mistakes, is to create consequences, then point number 1 should not just be for Solo to be the tribal chief. Point number 1 should be for Solo to win what Roman lost, which is the undisputed WWE Championship. Solo's not beating Cody Rhodes for that title anytime soon. It's not going to happen. If Cody is on SmackDown, it doesn't make sense for Solo to not go after Cody. If Solo goes after Cody, Solo loses. If Solo loses against Cody, then shouldn't Tama Tonga have to beat up Solo now? It just disrupts the story to me if Cody is on SmackDown. In my head right now, as I'm thinking about it, I could change my mind. Damian Priest is another story. So, I don't know. Maybe do you put Jey Uso on SmackDown and have him be a rival? Like, you don't want to rush anything, I feel like. I feel like this new Bloodline, you don't want to rush into, okay, let's do the Jey Uso match. Okay, let's do the match with Cody. Okay, it's space it out a little bit. Let it breathe. Let this new Bloodline find enemies that are new that they can beat, so that we can build this into a force that Roman and the Usos may have some trouble with, because Roman and the Usos are like impossibly good. So because of that, I feel like Priest is the one that should probably go over to SmackDown. Cody stays on Raw. And then you can still, by the way, you can still bring people over from Raw to go to SmackDown because the draft is happening, or the people that are already there. That builds an opportunity for an LA Knight, for a Kevin Owens, for a Randy Orton. Damian Priest versus Randy Orton in a world title program on SmackDown. I'll put my money down for that. 1,000%. By the way, Damian Priest was our guest on The Bump, and I know I do a lot of shows. I don't expect you to watch every single thing that I do. I don't know if there are that many hours in the day, but if you like Notsam Wrestling and you like the interviews that we do here on Notsam Wrestling, the Damian Priest interview that we did on The Bump this week was a really special one. He was on the show for the entire run. We watched back the Money in the Bank cash-in with him. We watched back the ovation that he got on Raw with him, and just talked to him from a very real place, right? It was a very non-sort of WWE storyline interview, and I think more of an interview that shows you who this guy is and the journey that he's been on to get the title that's now around his waist. So after this podcast today, if I could give you any other recommendations, go over to the WWE's YouTube page and watch the latest episode of The Bump with Damian Priest, because it really was a great one, and Damian Priest was an incredible guest. Cody Rhodes' first week as champion happened. So we talked, of course, at length. Last week's podcast came out on a Wednesday, so we had the opportunity to talk about the promo with The Rock. And the fact that The Rock interrupted Cody. The fact that The Rock gave Cody his props for beating Roman Reigns, but let Cody know that that story may be over, but our story has just begun, and he gave Cody a gift. He said, never break my heart again. The Rock's got to go make some movies now. But when The Rock comes back, he'll be looking for you. And then The Rock took off. Of course, we got the Fatal 4-Way match on Raw to determine Jey Uso as the number one contender to Damian Priest. On SmackDown this week, we got two triple threats that ended with AJ Styles and LA Knight both winning. Next week on SmackDown, we've got AJ Styles versus LA Knight WrestleMania rematch, where the winner will face Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Championship at Backlash in France. I believe it'll be AJ Styles. I hope it'll be AJ Styles, not because I don't want to see LA Knight get the opportunity, but because somehow there's never been an AJ Styles-Cody Rhodes match. AJ Styles is a villain now. Cody Rhodes is a heel. Cody Rhodes will come out, bright as the sun, blonde hair, red, white, and blue. AJ Styles will be emo AJ, dark hair in front of his face, black clothing, new music. I just think that there's so much there. And if you want that first match, the first Cody championship match, I think that they'll be able to make magic together in France. And it will also just why split the vote? I mean, the whole point of Cody is there's finally a babyface that people love. So the idea of his first match is against another babyface just doesn't work for me. And LA Knight got the victory at WrestleMania. So let's even the odds. Have AJ beat LA Knight, goes to the pay-per-view. Cody wins, but AJ Styles really puts him through the ringer. And then we can do a rubber match between AJ and LA Knight to finally see who's the GOAT. But, the GOAT. But I think what was interesting about SmackDown was really just Cody kind of presenting himself as champion, letting the folks know that the number one contendership would be determined on SmackDown, and going through the 6 opponents and referencing the fact that every single one of them, there was a draw. Every single one of them, there was a reason to watch, which I think was very important because it sets up the fact that even though Roman's gone, there's a whole roster ready to challenge Cody Rhodes. And for as much as people said about Roman Reigns, there's a lot of responsibility on Cody Rhodes' shoulders. Roman did an amazing thing, adding the amount of value that he added to that title. And now he's giving it to Cody Rhodes. That energy is passed on to Cody Rhodes. That's what the art of professional wrestling is about. Now, it's Cody's responsibility in an entirely new way, by the way. Roman was able to do that by defending the title less, by showing up less, by making every single match feel like a super fight. Cody has to figure out how to maintain that value and then add to it and still defend the title every pay-per-view, every house show, because that's who Cody is. And that's going to mean building up those opponents the way Cody built them up, which I thought was really, really good. Cody said before he was going over those 6 opponents that the Rock returned a gift, that what he placed in Cody's hand, he didn't say exactly what it was, but he said it was a gift that the Rock had given him, or that he had given the Rock. And the Rock returned it, and he described it as a wartime overture. And then Cody said that the Rock is gone, but he'll be waiting. He's ready for the Rock when the Rock returns. But, then talked about how that was in the rearview mirror. And he also brought up that he and AJ Styles are the only 2 people on the list to have won both the NWA and the WWE Championship now, which is really interesting. In the modern era, that's part of the great thing about Billy Corgan bringing back the NWA is that Cody Rhodes had the opportunity to say, yeah, I won the NWA championship. And of course, AJ Styles was able to win it in TNA back when it was still NWA TNA. So very interested to see how this all plays out. I think that we're easing in to the Cody title run, but we are going to have to tell a non-Bloodline story soon. And I think we'll be able to. People doubted after WrestleMania last year. They said, oh, well, what's Cody going to do now? Here comes Brock, and that set us up for the rest of the year. We didn't lose an ounce. So, between you got Backlash, and then after Backlash, you're what? May, June, July, 2 months away from Money in the Bank. That'll change everything. I think that hopefully we'll see things get a little personal, and who knows? Well, if maybe AJ Styles gets drafted to Raw, and then that way after Backlash, the story can continue between AJ and Cody. I'm sure people want a Randy Orton-Cody match. As much as I just said Randy Orton as a babyface versus Damian Priest would be great. Randy Orton turning heel once again and haunting Cody Rhodes, I think would be awesome. It'll be really interesting to see how this title run goes because, there's no way it'll be 3 years, but also he can't lose it anytime soon. So how do you make people believe that he might? We'll see. I think it'll be really, really interesting. Speaking of really interesting, we've got some Easter eggs popping up on WWE TV again. If you've watched the Bray Wyatt documentary, which was just a phenomenal piece that the WWE put together, it's on Peacock now. If you haven't seen it yet, please watch it because it really is, it's pretty remarkable to tell you the truth. But at the end of it, there's a tease for the return of Uncle Howdy. Of course, Uncle Howdy, who they show in the doc, being portrayed by Bo Dallas, Taylor Rotunda. But what we've gotten right around since then, that came out the Monday before WrestleMania. We've gotten some stuff happening. We got some music playing in the arena during commercial breaks, which if you remember, White Rabbit was playing in the arena before commercial breaks when it was time for Bray Wyatt to return. We've got a glitch came up on Monday Night Raw during a Bronson Reed promo. And if you pause it in just the right spot, it just says hello. Then after that, a tweet went up on WWE's Twitter account that just said hello, 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 hello over and over again and then was deleted. Then I believe on SmackDown it was this week, a glitch came up that if you paused it in just the right place, it said, you forgot about us. It'll be, again, interesting to see how they pull off Uncle Howdy without Bray, if that's where all this is going. But I think this all applies to the rule of everything counts. We talked about everything counting by going all the way back to the Islanders and Haku when we talk about the Bloodline. But when we talk about everything counts, we're even talking about the quote-unquote non-kayfabe documentaries that WWE puts out. The Roman Reigns documentary on A&E was half documentary, half promotional device to get us to WrestleMania and to put stakes on WrestleMania. There were people that watched that documentary that all of a sudden were like, you know what? I do have an appreciation for Roman Reigns. You know what? I'm not sure I'm ready for Roman Reigns' title run to come to an end. How about the fact that in the Bray Wyatt documentary, Taylor, Bo Dallas, comes across, first of all, he comes across incredibly well in that whole thing. But he says, I've always wanted to be exactly like my brother. That's who I've always wanted to be like. He's always been my role model. All I wanted to do was be like my brother. And now and the greatest time of my life was when I got to be Uncle Howdy and work with him. All I've ever wanted to do is be like my brother. Now we're watching this play out, potentially in real time. We're assuming things. We're picking at straws here, but it feels like that's what we're getting. And if that's what we're getting, I'm excited, man. I'm excited. I'm excited for what is happening in the WWE post-WrestleMania, but really in the industry as a whole. There's a lot of stuff happening. Of course, it would be remiss not to bring up Dynamite from this week and AEW putting out the CM Punk footage. The only thing, first of all, this isn't the place for it, right? Like, I think that the dunking, it's become a sport to dunk on AEW, and it's not necessarily a sport that is what we do on this show. Not that everybody should create content the way they want to create content. It's just, I like to talk about the things that I like here. What I will say is of course, you got to watch it as a fan, right? And I left that going like, to what end? What was the point of that? The television rating was good. So if it was just kind of a short-term fix to get a good television rating, then that's good. But ultimately, when you look at the card for their next pay-per-view, it's bonkers. The card for the Dynasty pay-per-view is absolutely insane. If they just said, hey, wrestling is in an incredible place right now. The WWE is as hot as it's been in decades, and maybe getting to a place where it's hotter than it's ever been. Financially, it's completely blown away what anybody thought was possible for a wrestling company, right? That's the beauty of what's going on. That from a business perspective, WWE is redefining what a professional wrestling company can do. And it's almost like if I'm running my own wrestling company, I go, that's great what's going on over there. Welcome all new wrestling fans that are coming in because of it. Even more importantly, welcome all new investors that are coming in because of it. We also have a great show over here. You should come check out our show. If you like that, you'll like this. That, to me, is the business strategy. But all I do is the podcast. I don't know. We also happen to have a superstar on our roster that just won the IWGP Championship. There's one person on the planet who's won the WWE, AEW, and IWGP Championships, and that's Jon Moxley, who's, as a wrestler, is so appealing because more so than almost anybody else, has done things completely his own way. And with as many people are talking about Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns right now, the third member of the Shield is over here also making history his own way. You go back to Paul Heyman and you go back to ECW. What did ECW do? Put the positives up here, bury the negatives all the way down here. It's, to me, the smartest philosophy you can have in wrestling. But if you disagree with me, write in. Anybody that's got opinions, feel free to write in. NotSamWrestling@gmail.com is our email address. We're going to go to some emails. NotSamWrestling@gmail.com. Let's see here. Let's get to these. Boom. Salty writes in, hey, Sam. Last week I made a rookie mistake and didn't include my name in the email. I'm so sorry about that. I attended my first Smack. Your name's not here either. I can't. Kevin writes in, Sam, it's not Kevin from Sweden. Betting against friends can be a blast over the year. This better not be an ad read. Over the years, my friend and I have developed a pretty fun format that you will find fun. We set a season, example, now through SummerSlam, and take turns drafting superstars. If a superstar that I pick wins any PLE, I get a point, PLE match. We value each point at $40. At the end of the season, any superstar holding any Raw SD title gets a bonus point. Money in the Bank and King of the Ring also get bonus points. I left Mania with $120 and owe you a cut. Your predictions have been a huge help. You are my podcast tribal chief. Compare my top 10 to his and tell me who wins this season. Okay. Kevin's list. Rhea Ripley, strong. So you're saying people that are going to win PLE matches. Logan Paul, that was a risk because he will win, but he won't be on many PLEs. he goes heavy first half of the year. So the fact that we've already seen him at the Chamber and Rumble and WrestleMania, I don't know if, he is the United States champion, though. That was a risk. Drew McIntyre, I think that's a strong pick because Drew getting fooled with twice is going to lead to some victories. But if we get that CM Punk match, he's probably not going to beat Punk. Unless he beats Punk the first time. Okay, Ripley and Drew are good picks. That's two good picks. Jade Cargill's a great pick. Because Tiffany Stratton's a good pick. Sami Zayn's a good pick because I don't think they'll take the title off him right away. Weird that you picked CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. But I guess you're hedging your bets. But again, we don't know when CM Punk is coming back. So I don't know if that was a great one. Bianca Belair is a maybe. Jey Uso, I doubt he's going to win the World Heavyweight title. And Seth Rollins, you picked Seth Rollins? He's not even going to be on TV. I don't know. And your friend picked Cody, killer pick. Priest, killer pick. Bailey, killer pick. Jacob Fatu, we don't even know if he's actually signed. That's crazy. Gunther, okay. Sheamus, good pick. Dom, I don't know. Kairi Sane, I don't know. LA Knight, Braun Breaker was a good pick. I'm going to say his will probably squeak you out, to tell you the truth. I think his might squeak you out. Tyler writes in, I acknowledge you, my tribal chief of wrestling podcasts. I've seen a lot of talk of the Undertaker's storyline connection with past feud members of the Bloodline, but I haven't heard anyone mention the Brock Lesnar connection. What if part of the reason that Taker showed up is because it was Paul Heyman that ended the streak, and Undertaker viewed Cody as his best opportunity to take another Paul Heyman guy's streak away? I would love to hear your thoughts on this. It's a stretch. It's possible. I took the Undertaker's presence at WrestleMania as more of like the sort of locker room sheriff. I took, it wasn't so much that the Undertaker was there because he had some matches with The Rock or because Roman Reigns beat him at WrestleMania. I took the Undertaker being there as the Undertaker is making sure that what happens, it's still his locker room. It's still his yard. And he wants to make sure that what should happen is what does happen. He wants to do what's best for business, as he always did. That's how I took Undertaker. Let's see. Matt writes in, first time, long time from England. Love it. Hope you and your family are well. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do to keep us entertained on this wild ride that is WWE and the Triple H era. Wanted your thoughts on a possible Bloodline Civil War Games. Read that Roman won't be back till SummerSlam, so this isn't fantasy booking 6 months in advance. Whether it is or it isn't, that's the first thing. When you see the possibility of two factions being rivals with one another, I think War Games is where the head goes immediately. Thomas said orders of the tribal chief, which in my view, as Roman has said in the past, is the man holding a championship in the family. While it's not recognized, there's only one champion in the moment of the Bloodline, the people's champion. No. With Jacob Fatu imminent, could we see a heel Bloodline Rock Solo Tama Jacob square off against a babyface reunited Usos with a returning Roman and a favor pulled in by Jey, Sami Zayn? Look, it would be beautiful. I don't know what the odds are that The Rock competes in War Games, especially if that's his first match post-WrestleMania, although it would be a multi-person match. I'm not against it whatsoever. I do not. You can't say, if you tell me, and look, this is just my logic. I'm not saying this is true or false, right? Because I also said Bloodline rules mean that only Bloodline should be able to interfere. And I stand by that. I wasn't saying it will mean that. I'm saying it should mean that, okay? You're saying that Roman has said in the past the man holding a championship in the family is the head of the table. Roman specifically said Solo is the next in line to be tribal chief. So you don't have to do hoops to figure this out. You can't say, well, Roman technically said that, and if you connect that with this, then Roman said Solo's the next in line. Solo's taking his spot as the next in line. That's the only way that I read it. The only way. Eventually, The Rock could come back. The Rock could decide to side with Solo's bloodline and do what he did with Roman's bloodline and be with them. But ultimately, The Rock acknowledged Roman Reigns as the tribal chief. Roman said Solo is the next tribal chief. I don't know how Rock becomes the tribal chief. Mathematically, even with Steiner math, I can't make it add up. Let's see. This is from Arlie, I think, if you pronounce that. 3 things. When you gave your Rollins take on Night 2's emergency pod, don't bring that up. I instantly thought out loud, Sam is tired as you know what. You had okay, I appreciate that. Okay, all right, I appreciate where you're going. You had a super busy week, and it was only natural an oversight like that would occur. Respect and appreciate the hustle. Yes, you read it right. You're the man. Okay, I appreciate that. 2, I know you enjoy this kind of thing. I wanted to share that during WrestleMania, I had people who know I'm a fan blowing up my phone to reveal that they were watching the show, from colleagues to old friends to my brother to so many non-fans who were tuning in and they were enjoying it. Many, oh shit, texts during the main event. Yes, I do love that stuff. 2 for 2 right now. Because, yes, you're right. And this is the first time in a long time that that's happened like regularly. And number 3, I think Rock and Roman's story will be about Rock sticking his nose in the Bloodline business, which ended up costing Roman his title. That I disagree with. Before Rock came along, Roman had everything on lock. Then the final boss shows up, introduces the Bloodline rules stipulation, which ultimately led to Cody being able to receive help. If not for Rock and his ego, Roman would have faced Cody traditionally and found a way to cheat just like last year to retain. Rock screwed up the good thing they had going with his involvement. I disagree with that. I think that there is a way to get there you're not totally off. But if the idea of this version of Roman Reigns is that accountability is important, there's 2 things. Number 1, Roman has to maintain accountability for this version of Roman Reigns, which means he won't blame anybody else for the loss. Number 2, for the storytelling of all of it, it's essential that Seth Rollins is that piece that caused Roman to lose. It's what bonds Seth and Roman forever. Seth turned on Roman. Roman was never able to beat Seth even in the 3.5 years as champion. Seth is the one that cost Roman the title. Like, this is all so important to Seth that if all of a sudden Roman goes, yeah, it's The Rock's fault that I lost because he enabled Seth to interfere. Well, now you're taking it away from Seth and giving it to The Rock. And that it's Seth's to have. And its value is with Seth. So that the first 2 points, I'm with you. 3rd point, no, that's Seth's. You can't take that away from him. Nick in Australia. I'm still riding the wave that was WrestleMania. Watched it 3 times and still blown away by the caliber of storytelling and raw emotion. I love professional wrestling. I love this email. I want to give flowers to Samantha Irvin. What a star. She made each match feel important and special. The emotion she vocalized when announcing Cody Rhodes as our new champion was the exact same emotion I felt. I had the unexpected reaction of tears filling my eyes and numbness inside my body when Charles Robinson made that 3 count. How great that we are living in an era where us fans can have that visceral of a response. Well, I'll tell you this about Sam Irvin. The reason you felt that way is because she felt that way. The live show that I did in Tampa, I had her on as my guest, and that video is on the Notsam Wrestling YouTube channel if you want to check it out. But she gets in to how big of a fan she is and has always been. She is a lifetime WWE fan. She's us. You could sit there and just talk to her about wrestling forever. She grew up with it. Her dad got her into it. She loves it. And she lets all that out when she acts as a ring announcer the same way any of us would dream of doing. And she does it. And also, like, she's able to display all that emotion, but then also is extremely good and has this unimaginable voice. So those things combined, yeah, they put her in GOAT territory for sure. I know you don't like Mount Rushmores, hate Mount Rushmores because people don't do them properly, because everybody thinks Mount Rushmores are just top 4. And that's not what Mount Rushmore is. Mount Rushmore is not the top 4 presidents. Everybody on Mount Rushmore has a specific reason for being on Mount Rushmore. Each president symbolizes a different thing in the history of America. From the birth, I'm not going to give you a history lesson here, but if you do a Mount Rushmore and you just rank your top 4 or the 4 most important, you're doing it totally wrong. Look up Mount Rushmore. I'm so sick of Mount Rushmores. They're dumb. Oh, I hope somebody asked me for a Mount Rushmore. But if you had to pick one ring announcer to introduce... Okay, I know you don't like Mount Rushmores, but if you had to pick one ring announcer to introduce you at a live Not Sam show, who would it be? I mean, have you heard the intro? I mean, that's not a ring announcer. That's my wife, actually.
Introducing your host from New York.
It's Howard Finkel, bro. Come on, dude. Howard Finkel. I mean, you can't go with the OG. Who else has Howard Finkel announcing them on their podcast? Nobody. I mean, I'm goated. I always loved Tony Chimmel's Rated R Superstar announcement. I also want to give, but by the way, yeah, I mean, I had Mike Rome announce me. I don't remember if I put Samantha Irvin to work like that. I think I announced her. But I would love to get a Not Sam Samantha Irvin announcement. But yeah, I mean, Howard Finkel is my guy just because he's the ring announcer from my childhood. That's the voice. But all that said, without any sort of bias of when you grew up and everything, it's hard to argue that Samantha Irvin is not the best. I want to give a shout out to my fellow Aussie Rhea Ripley and her honesty in sharing her 2-hour-long panic attack before her match with Becky. As a fellow anxiety sufferer who experiences panic attacks, it is so refreshing that this was acknowledged. Wrestling has been one of my tools to being back to center when suffering from symptoms of anxiety and panic. That's the best. Sam, keep up the amazing work. Would love a live Not Sam show in Australia when WWE tours again. Man, I love Australia. I would love to do a show in Australia. If you can find me a venue that'll get me out there, if I break even, I will do a live show in Australia. I can't be spending money. I got a family to support. But if you can figure out a way for me to break even, I'll do a live show in Australia. Boom, done. Because I love it over there. And it really is. You're good to bring up that point about Rhea Ripley. Because that's one of the many things that make Rhea Ripley so great, is that while she is so larger than life and has become a person that is such a walking, talking, living, breathing superhero, she also has her shoulders are about 5 feet wide. She's an incredible specimen and yet is somehow so relatable and such a human being that it's impossible not to be on her side. She's amazing. Come on. Tom, again from England. It's a long email. You'll probably complain, but in my defense, you say you always hate it when people go 6 months without explanation. All right, I'm going to try this, Tom. This is so long, dude. Okay, what would you be more annoyed at? Okay. 1, losing your title at WrestleMania 40 to someone that learned from their past mistakes and has proven to be worthy of a title reign. Or 2, less than 24 hours after losing your title, having someone that's below you in the pecking order of the bloodline coming out on TV for the world to see, telling everyone that your story's done and that his story is just beginning and that he will be the one to dethrone Cody. Okay, so you're basically asking me, do I think Roman is more annoyed at Cody or The Rock? I mean, I think the tribal chief is probably, theoretically, that character doesn't need to be annoyed at Cody because we found out on SmackDown. He's acknowledging that he's the one that made the mistake. So I'm going to say he's not annoyed at Cody. He's more annoyed at maybe The Rock, but Solo is the one that he's annoyed with. All right, I'm not going to read the rest of the email, dude. I'm sorry, but I appreciate it. Jeremy, longtime listener, first-time emailer. I think the MVP of WrestleMania 40 wasn't any wrestler. It was Samantha Irvin. Look at that, Sam. A couple of them for you. She made every match feel special. This is a different person. She's the best ring announcer out there right now. When Michael Buffer acknowledges her, that proves she is one special woman that they got there. Please get her on the podcast. Well, I got her on the live podcast. Go to the YouTube channel. But I will, next time she's in New York, I'd love to have her sit down and have a longer interview with her. But yeah, Triple H acknowledging that she is The company's Michael Buffer. Look, I do think the MVP of WrestleMania was Seth Rollins. But, man, was it great having Samantha Irvin out there for all the matches. One of us. Faith writes in, hope you're well. I was wanting your opinion on how WWE has been doing some different camera angles lately. Ooh, Faith, details. I really noticed on an episode of Raw a few weeks ago, there's a continuous take of Sami Zayn leaving the ring, going through Gorilla and into the back and walking past Awesome Truth, talking to DIY, where we see Drew talking to Heyman in the background. The camera then follows Awesome Truth out of the ring all the way. This was one single take. I'm really enjoying things like that. Yeah. I think it's awesome. I love when little details change because it means that they're paying attention to the details. I notice all of it. I love when they started doing the graphics going into commercial break. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's different. I love that now to really show off how sold out that they are. They go to like the mezzanine and then like they'll walk through the crowd and then you'll go into where the crowd is sitting and see everybody. You know, all those steady shots that they're doing where somebody is like walking with you. They're very difficult to do. But I think that's Stu, who, John Cena always talks to when he comes to the ring. Real talented people over there in their camera crew. But yeah, I love all those that set the scene. I love that they've been using the aerial shot, the Bret and Owen WrestleMania 10 shot a lot more. Yeah, it really feels like they're looking at how they can do things differently and how they can make things better and better and better and better. And that's how you get a great product. Brian writes in, last year I had the honor of being roasted by you because you hated my opinion after the Bloodline Civil War tag match that Roman shouldn't have been pinned until he ultimately dropped the belt. Fast forward to today, and I want to humbly apologize. Yes! Roman taking that pin from Jay didn't diminish Roman's eventual loss to Cody at Mania 1 iota. Once again, the last professional broadcaster was right, and the head of the proverbial wrestling podcasting table knew best. Brian, I appreciate you. I am not an I told you so guy. I am not a see I was right guy. Honestly, the see I was right, remember when I said, hey, you were wrong and I was right thing is, a reddest of the red flag to me. When someone goes out of their way to go, remember that conversation we had? I was right. I'm like, cool. What do you want, a cookie? Like, it is one of the great pet peeves of my existence. So I don't do it, is what I'm trying to tell you. And I think that everybody, I've been wrong, I've been right. I do it right out in front for all of you to see. Everybody else, when I'm roasting you on these emails, if you come back the next week with a great email, like, all right, we're good. Like, or even if I'm roasting you and I'm like, I don't agree with that, we're still good. You know what I mean? Like, it's not this lifetime thing, but the fact that Brian, I do respect the opposite. I do greatly respect when somebody who was wrong goes, hey, I know we had that thing. Well, guess what? You were right. I go, I don't need it, but I very much appreciate it. And Brian, you just earned yourself a seat at the table of which I am ahead of. So Brian, great email. Good for you. Kyle writes in, first of all, God bless your sweet wife for putting up with all the emergency podcasts over WrestleMania season. I told her they're necessary. Second, the WWE should be paying you for all those pods. You're right. Thank you for all of them. Maybe the workday makes the workday better for me. Question, loved WrestleMania, but it drives me nuts the number of matches where we'd see finishers having to be done 3 or more times. In my mind, it makes the finisher not as devastating. What say you? And how would you do it differently, if at all? I think it's part of it being WrestleMania 40. 40 years of modern day professional wrestling, even further back, honestly, because Starrcade was like in 1983, and Starrcade was just as modern professional wrestling, and you can keep going back. But for WWE as we know it, what are we at? 41, 42 years. We've seen every move. You can't tell me that a DDT is going to take somebody out anymore. You can't tell me that maybe if Shawn Michaels does the super kick, but you have to find new ways to tell stories. You can't just keep going, finish, pin, done, next. I think part of evolution is the fact that you can't just have somebody do a finisher once and it's over. And I think that it makes sense. Look, if you watch UFC, which a lot of people are. Obviously, they're doing pretty well. UFC fights have completely evolved. What a UFC fights look, we just saw UFC 300 over the weekend. Great card. But a fight at UFC 300 looks drastically different than a fight at UFC 100, which looked drastically different than a fight at UFC 1. And that's because fighters evolve, styles evolve. You can now train for a career in mixed martial arts based on watching UFC fights. That hadn't occurred several years ago. The fighters, even at UFC 100, just based on age alone, they wouldn't have had the opportunity to grow up watching the Ultimate Fighting Championship. They wouldn't have had the opportunity to grow up evolving, you know? People today, they've grown up watching super kicks. And by the way, Sean was hitting super kicks in 1992 before it was his finisher and they were getting kicked out of. So, you know, I mean, I think that people expect it. You want near falls. You want close finishes. You can't do it every match. But in a big match like at WrestleMania, I don't have a problem with it. I really don't have a problem with it at all. Because it's not just about hitting your finisher. It's about having a strategy that wins you the entire match. Brem, been a wrestling fan since I was a young kid, 44 years old. I've watched on and off in the mid-2000s, but when the pandemic hit, I was living in my truck. Wow. And I wondered how wrestling was going on with no fans. I got hooked all over again. That's amazing. Pandemic wrestling got you. It got through living in my truck or tent with my dog. Congrats, man. It's awesome again. It's hard with just streaming, but I watch the highlights and full segments every Tuesday, Saturday, and every PLE. I'm all in again. Your podcast and Busted Open help me fill in some pieces I can't see. You're awesome. Bloodline looks like it's going to get even stronger and deeper now. Randy Orton, my guy. What title is he going to go for? I don't know. We were talking about that earlier. And who's going to be the first to challenge Cody? I think it's going to be AJ Styles. I love that. That's such a great story. Oh, Avik. I met Avik. What's the haps from London as I'm finally back home? Just thought I'd run a few things past you. I met Avik in Philly at WrestleMania. He was there. My brother and I landed in Philly on the Wednesday of Mania week, and all of a sudden, AJ Styles is in the queue line for us in America, next to me checking in. Mind blown as I realized all of WWE were staying in our hotel. Oh, that's so funny. You didn't book the WrestleMania hotel knowing it was the WrestleMania hotel. That's wild. You just book a hotel and it turns out to be the Talent Hotel. That's awesome. Then we booked your show at the Helium Comedy Club, and I have to admit, Truth is the funniest man on earth. By the way, we'll have some of the Helium show going up this week on the Notsam Wrestling YouTube channel. It was a great show and a great way to start the week. I'm glad I bumped into Truth in the hotel and thanked him for the show. He said, WrestleMania? I said, no, Sam Roberts show. He chuckled. It's impossible not to laugh in his vicinity. After that, I met you. Finally. All I said was, Avik from London asked, and you said, oh, hey, nice to meet you. You couldn't have been nicer. Thanks for the pick as the bar was heaving. I don't know what that means. But long story long. After a Mania weekend week, he said short, with probably the greatest main event of all time, meeting my heroes such as X-Pac, who remembered me from Manchester, finally meeting my current favorite wrestler, Matt Cardona, and the Major Pod. It was fun bumping into you again, and you put your hands up saying, look, I was wrong. You said you'd be back for a chat, but I think Karrion Kross started chatting to us. Yeah. But yeah, to the listeners of this pod, I'd encourage you to attend a Not Sam live show. It's fun and a great way to start a week for a pay-per-view. And also, when watching Night 1 of Mania, the TV doesn't do it justice as how freaking cold it was. Yeah, it was. Miz said, you need a Snickers. My bro yelled back, I need a blanket. Hope to see you in London for All In or down the road. No questions except, you think Mattel will release a double Ultimate pack of Cody and Seth in Night 1 and Night 2 gear? I hope we get a Cody Night 1 and a Seth Night 2. I'm sure we'll get a Cody Night 2. Mizzy, can we call the era between 20 to 2024 the Bloodline era? No. It's not its own era. No. If anything, no. Come on. There's the pandemic era, and then after the pandemic era starts the new era. Hey, Sam. I think this will be the last one. Jesse from Melbourne, Australia here. And I have a lot of international emailers this week, guys. Good for you. I have what I think is a pretty wild idea. Pretty cool. And if done poorly, could be a disaster. Oh, great. But if done well, this could be super memorable. With the recent documentary about Bray Wyatt and the inclusion of Bo Dallas into that story, I would love to see a farewell match for The Fiend. Bo Dallas looks so similar to Bray, and the mystical nature of the Fiend character makes me think it could be done in a super respectful way, potentially something more cinematic along the lines of the Firefly Funhouse match that gives fans an opportunity to say farewell to the Fiend and welcome what Taylor Rotunda's new character may be. I haven't got it all figured out yet, but I think it could potentially be a really unique match that could really only work with a character such as Bray Wyatt. Love the pod. Thank you for all that you do. I don't know, man. I'm reserving judgment until we see what happens. Okay? Obviously something's happening, I think, based on the all the stuff that's going on, all the little glitches and stuff like that. But we'll see. We will see. I appreciate you guys hanging out. Keep checking the YouTube channel and the podcast feed for interviews from the live show at the Helium. We'll see you in Toronto for the next live show. Ooh. And I'll see you on the bump. I'll see you on Raw Talk. And maybe some emergency podcasts. Who knows? Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.